Hey y'all, Coach in the Fight here, guys. Stay with me.
Good morning.
And in today's class, we're talking about the true date of Pentecost.
Okay.
The scriptural date. Did you know that there's a difference?
I mean, a date that is celebrated and a date that Scripture outlines that it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe so. I think it's sort of like the Sabbath day. It's a day that's celebrated and it's a day that the Most High gives. That's the correct date, yeah.
So what you understand is if you Googled the date for Pentecost, you may get different dates.
Right.
Like this one, June the 8th, 2025, is a date that you will get for Pentecost, but it's not the biblical date.
Okay.
You see that down at the bottom. You want to read that?
So it says Pentecost Sunday is celebrated 50 days after Easter. In 2025, it falls on June 8th. This event is celebrated to commemorate the gift of the Holy Spirit.
So there's one day for Pentecost. But notice that it's calculated 50 days after Easter.
Right.
That's not the correct way we calculate Pentecost. In fact, when we're over here in the Book of Leviticus, chapter 23, it talks about how we are to calculate Pentecost. It says number 50 days. Would you read verse 15?
And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete.
So this is not saying 7 Sabbaths after Easter.
Right.
It's saying 7 Sabbaths after this wave offering, which we see in verse 11. But then if you say when is Shavuot, you get a different date. What's the difference between Pentecost and Shavuot?
I don't recall.
It says Pentecost Sunday. So this is the Christian Pentecost. You see that Pentecost Sunday. It always falls on Sunday for them because it always falls 50 days after Easter Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you put it in Shavuot, it says the Jewish Feast of Weeks is celebrated every year on the 6th day of the 3rd month. You want to read it?
Shavuot, the Jewish Feast of Weeks, is celebrated every year on the 6th of Sivan. That date is 7 weeks after Passover, hence the name, and falls in May or June of the Gregorian calendar.
Now look right here where it says after Passover. 7 weeks after Passover. But when we come to Leviticus 23, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say 7 weeks after Passover. It says 7 weeks from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. So if you're looking at a calendar, you have Passover here, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread starting here, the 15th day of the first month. That's where they're saying that the Jewish Pentecost date started. And so if you count that day, if you count those days until June the 1st, and I haven't, they're celebrating Pentecost around this time right here. They actually say June the 1st through the 3rd. So that's the 4th, 5th, and the 6th of the 3rd month that they're celebrating. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's Jewish. So that's 2 different dates that you have already. Now, actually 3. If you count Leviticus 23, it tells you from 50 days from the wave offering. So the wave offering, if you go back to spring of 2025, the Feast of First Fruits or the wave offering would have been on or about April 22nd, on or about April 21st, April 22nd. And so then the Feast of Weeks would then land on or about June the 10th, June the 11th, June the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3 different dates that you have, a Jewish, a Christian, and now we're about to talk about the biblical, the scriptural. Right. And to talk about the scriptural, we're going to the Book of Jubilees. Thing is, we're going to the R.H. Charles translation. I think it's important to know where this book is coming from because we're going to be looking in the footnotes, something we don't normally do.
Okay.
So now one of the first chapters we're going to look at is chapter 6. Now we've done many classes on this as we talked about the Feast of Weeks. Matter of fact, let me do a search for weeks. 10 times it's listed. We see in the book that it is supposed to be celebrated once a year. It is partly to renew the covenant. We see it's associated with first fruits. But then when we get to the footnote, notice this. Read this right here. This is page 63. The first footnote we see on page 63. Matter of fact, let's go back and click on it. Start right there at verse 17. Matter of fact, start at 16.
He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth.
You know what we're talking about.
Right.
This is after the flood. I'm talking about the rainbow.
For this reason, it is ordained and written in the heavenly tables that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year, to renew the covenant every year.
So it's to renew the covenant. We're going to find out that it is a twofold feast too. So that's a main part, is to renew the covenant, this Noahic covenant. Read one more verse at least.
And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation to the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his son observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years to the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his son did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood.
Yeah, so that's what the Noahide covenant is about, not eating blood. It says there in Genesis, we can eat anything, just don't eat the blood in it. Take the blood out first. Right. And so that's what this covenant is about. And so that's what we are renewing here during the Feast of Pentecost, is this, this covenant that we won't eat blood. But you see that it only lasted for them a period of time, and then they started eating the blood again, basically after Noah died.
Right.
But let's go back to that footnote. Read it.
The Feast of Weeks is here only connected with Noah's covenant, the establishment of which it is supposed to commemorate. Later, Judaism associated it with the giving of the law on Sinai. It was celebrated, according to our book, on the 15th day of the 3rd month.
On the 15th day of the 3rd month.
Right.
But wait now. We saw that the Jewish calendar has it on the 6th day of the 3rd month.
Right.
But the translators of the text interpreted it as the 15th day. In other words, when you go back and read the book, it says the 15th day, but the Jewish community is doing it on the 6th day every year. Mm-hmm. Here's another footnote down here, 65:2. Let's go up and look at the verse. Let's start at verse 32.
And command thou the children of Israel, that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast.
This is talking about the sacred calendar and how it's important to use the 364-day system. Don't revert to a 365-day solar system like the Gregorian calendar, but stick to the total celestial system, the sun, the moon, and the stars, to come up with the 364-day system. And then you don't have to worry about anything getting off track. But if you don't, let's read verse 33.
But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order, and they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged.
So this is saying if we go to a different calendar system, a Gregorian calendar or even a Jewish calendar system, things will get dislodged. We'll lose track of, the seasons. We'll lose track of the years. We won't know what year we're in. We won't know when the Sabbath days are, or sabbatical years. We won't know when the sabbatical years are, or what Sabbath days for that matter. That's why they have them on Saturday or Sunday. Just not according to the 364-day calendar. But go ahead, let's read another verse.
And they will neglect their ordinances.
Well, yeah, let's not forget that part, because what that's talking about is the feast days. Once we lose track of the 364 calendar, then we lose track of the feast days. It's saying that. And so that's why so many people around the world don't know about the feast days, is because even less know about the 364-day calendar.
Right.
But go ahead.
And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and will go wrong as to all the order of the years.
Okay, so we'll lose track of time. If we don't go by his calendar, we'll lose track of time. This is why these end times are sneaking up on us, because we've even lost track of what year we're in. But let's look back at this footnote here. You want to read it?
65 and 1. The effect of a solar year reckoned at 364 days would be that the festivals would always be celebrated on the same day of the week. Nisan 14 would always fall on a Sabbath. Nisan 22, when the wave shaft was to be offered, on a Sunday, and the Feast of Weeks 7/15 on a Sunday. There is some reason to suppose that this conception of a solar year of 364 days has a dogmatic basis.
So here, the translator's interpretation of it. The 364-day calendar is that it would make the days line up on the same day every year on the Gregorian calendar, if that makes sense. You know how days don't fall on the same year on the Gregorian calendar? Like an anniversary this year may be on a Tuesday, and then next year, for sure it's not going to be on a Tuesday. It'll be on a Wednesday. Well, on a 364-day calendar, it's always on the 14th day of the month. Tabernacles is always on the 15th day. Unleavened bread is always on the 15th day. And Pentecost, we find that is always on the 15th day, the same day of the month. And so that's what he's saying there. But then his misunderstanding of the calendar, see how to him that means that it's going to keep landing on a Sunday, which is pointing toward the Christian calendar, giving them kind of justification there. But my point is that the book is saying 7:15. Looking at ChatGPT, apparently there are a lot of translations. R.H. Charles is 1917, but you have James Vanderkam in 1989, O.S. Wittermuth, 1985. But then there's the George H. Shude in 1888. I'd like to see that one. So then I asked him to look and see if any of them mention the 15th. He says that Charles is the one who has the 15th in there, but the other English translations do not. All right, so now the next time we hear about the Feast of First Fruits and the Feast of Weeks, it's up here in what chapter is that? 15? We see this is Abraham celebrating the Feast of Weeks. But notice that it says that it's in the middle of the month. Not the 6th of the month, but the middle of the month. And we've done classes on this. We've included this in our classes that we've done. But when we do a search for weeks, we see this one on page 98, the third footnote. You want to start there at verse 1?
And in the 5th year of the 4th week of this Jubilee, in the 3rd month, in the middle of the month, Abram celebrated the feast of the first fruits of the grain harvest.
So it's saying that he celebrated in the middle of the month. Now let's go back to the footnote to see what it says. I'm going to read it.
The Feast of Weeks. The Pharisees celebrated this feast not in Savin 15, but on Savin 6. See further introduction.
Yeah. So in the footnotes we see here, we got to go to the further introduction. I don't know where that's at. But it's saying that the Pharisees are the ones who were celebrating on the 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Where can we find it? So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to explain this part here because I don't see the further introduction yet.
Yes, let's break this down. Footnote from R.H. Charles's translation of Jubilees 98-3. 98-3, i.e. the Feast of Weeks. The Pharisees celebrated this feast not on Sivan 15th, but on Sivan 6th. See further introduction. Magnifying glass what this means. This footnote is contrasting two different calendar traditions for celebrating the Feast of Weeks, also called Shavuot or Pentecost. 1. Sivan 15, Jubilees, Saducean, solar calendar. According to the Book of Jubilees, Pentecost is always celebrated on Sivan 15. This is because Jubilees uses a 364-day solar calendar, with weeks starting on the 4th day, Wednesday, and feasts falling on fixed days. The 15th of Sivan would be exactly 50 days, 7 weeks, from Nisan 26, the day they start counting after the Sabbath following Passover. This reflects the Sadducean or Qumran sectarian view, also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. 2. 7-6, Pharisaic, Rabbinic, lunar calendar. The Pharisees, and later Rabbinic Judaism, interpreted the biblical command in Leviticus chapter 23 verse 15-16 differently. They counted from the day after the first day of Passover, Nisan 16, not from the Sunday after Passover. That always made Pentecost fall on the 6th of Sivan, regardless of the weekday. Brain why Charles mentions this. Charles is pointing out that Jubilees disagrees with mainstream Jewish tradition. The footnote helps readers understand that the calendar in Jubilees is not the same as the one used in Rabbinic Judaism. He references the introduction of his translation, where he discusses the calendar differences and sectarian background more fully. Checkmark summary. Jubilees equals Pentecost on Sivan 15, Sadducean, solar calendar. Pharisees, Rabbinic Judaism equals Pentecost on Sivan 6, lunar calendar. Charles is flagging this calendar conflict as important background for understanding Jubilee's unique theology and calendar.
So this says that the Jewish people celebrating on the 6th are modern-day Pharisees, says ChatGPTs?
Yes, exactly. The Jewish people today celebrate Shavuot, Pentecost, on the 6th of Sivan, which follows the Pharisaic tradition, later codified by Rabbinic Judaism.
Codified.
Synagogue modern Jewish Shavuot equals Sivan 6. This dating comes from the Pharisaic interpretation of Leviticus chapter 23 verses 15-16, which says, "You shall count from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering." Leviticus chapter 23 verse 15. The Pharisees understood the Sabbath here to mean the first day of Passover, Nisan 15, a special Sabbath, Yom Tov, not necessarily the weekly Saturday. So they counted from Nisan 16, and after 50 days, you arrive at Sivan 6. This became the standard in Rabbinic Judaism, and is followed in all branches of Judaism today. So yes, when Charles notes in his footnote that the Pharisees celebrated on Sivan 6, he's pointing to what is still the standard Jewish practice today.
Now, I didn't plan on using a lot of ChatGPT. I may go back to it. I definitely got more questions. But let's look in chapter 34 when Jacob is celebrating the Feast of Weeks. And we can see the footnote down here is telling us that the Feast of Weeks again is on the 15th day of the month when it gets to Jacob's time. So Noah's time, Abraham's time, and now in Jacob's time, we're on the 15th day of the month. I want to start there at verse 4.
And he celebrated the harvest festival of the first fruits with old grain, for in all the land of Canaan there was not a handful of seed in the land, for the famine was over all the beasts and cattle and birds, and also over man.
Read verse 5.
And on the 16th the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said unto him, I am the God of thy fathers, the God of Abraham and Isaac. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation.
Yeah, so you see here that on the 16th day, the Lord appeared unto him. This is why our calendar looks like this. This is why we have this day here on the 16th day. So we covered just about everything I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I have a few more questions, but the way this works, according to what we read here, you see all of these days of Pentecost. You have the covenant day. That's the day when the Father came down and had a visitation with Moses and some others. Even there with the disciples there after the Messiah was crucified, there on the 16th day. That's the day after the feast day, the festival day on the 15th day. That's the day they celebrated. That's the day you eat, right? You have the joy. But it's on the 14th day that you're actually cooking and barbecuing and all day sweating over the meal. And then it is on the 13th day that is the actual day that you bring your stuff into Jerusalem when it's time to bake your bread and bring it out of the house and bring the lambs out of the house and all of your other offering out of the house. That's all the way back here on the 13th day. You'll start that process working all the way around until the 16th day. And that's when we see a visitation that Jacob had, and we should all be expecting something like that. Similarly, of course, spiritually. But that's what it's all about, making and getting prepared in these early days for something that can happen here on or about the 16th day. But that's all I want to talk about. You got any more questions about this? Him saying that the book saying that the Pharisees, the Jewish, modern Jews, are the Pharisees? I mean, he says it real hard and fast. It's like, anyway, if y'all got any comments or anything to add, y'all put it down in the comment section.
It's a good study. Well, we know that that day is day that we will start preparing is June. On the Gregorian calendar, it is June 10th.
Yeah, you'll have your Sabbath day on June the 9th. And then after June the 9th, you'll start bringing out of your habitation these bread and all of the other stuff according to Leviticus 23. It talks about it in other parts of the book, but we'll start on about June 10th. We'll be making the offering on June the 10th. We'll be barbecuing on June the 11th. Enjoying and feasting on June the 12th. Who knows what will happen on June the 13th? Let us know what y'all think down in the comment section.
We'll see you guys in the next video.
Shalom.
Shalom.